Hello, I'm Peace Weapon. Today I'm going to pick ASSA 700. I will try to explain what I am doing while picking, and I will give a short tutorial on how to pick the ASSA 700 at the end of the video. On request of many, I'm going to do this as a voiceover instead of putting captions. Tell me in the comments if you liked it like this, or if you prefer the captions. This is the key. Not a very difficult fitting. Nevertheless, this is a very difficult lock. It works, as you can see. The high difficulty of this lock is due to the tight tolerances and the pinning and countermilling of the core. Most notably, the pins. It has gins, which are a sort of spool that has a small lip that will interact with the countermilling in the core. Also, what we call the Christmas trees, that are like double spools, which the lower lip is also interacting with the countermilling of the core. Removing the gins and the Christmas trees from the countermilling of the core requires lots of precision, especially with the tight tolerances of the lock. Float picking is generally required. Here I'm using two Z-bars that I have taped on top to allow them to sit tightly and not move while I'm picking. I've placed them just deep enough so I can still pick the first pin. I'm going to use two hooks, a medium and a deep hook. The medium will be more useful for the front pins, because those two pins are set very high. I'll have to pick them on top of a ledge instead of the bottom of the keyway. There are three parts to picking this 700, because I have tapered pins and I have other pins that are sitting with their widest part at the shear line. I'm picking every of those pins until I get the full set. It's almost there. I'm just checking on number 3, that is a tapered pin, and now the 7, that is a standard, and I have the full set. At this moment I have 3 Christmas trees that have their large spool part at the shear line, so I have to pick them, and they pick just like spools. In this example, I already know the order the spools bind, so I'm picking them. I picked 2, now I will pick number 1 from the ledge, and the tensioner drops. It's easy to replace. And now I go for pin 6, that is also a Christmas tree. The spool part is now above the shear line, and now begins the tricky part. That will be picking the gins and the Christmas trees out of the countermilling. Now is the time to control the core, so I pinch the tensioners tightly. This will be better explained in the tutorial, but basically I'm pulsing the pin upwards and counter rotating with the tensioners so that I can make the driver pin leave the counter milling and go above the shear line. Slowly, as not to drop anything else. I'm setting number 4 here, and I'm going to 6. Lots of patience is needed because you don't want to counter rotate too fast, or you will risk dropping other gins that you might have already set above the shear line. Now I change my pick to a medium hook to set pin number 2. I'm trying to set the gin above the shear line, slowly counter rotating, and you will be able to see that I eventually do now. And now go to pin 1. Slowly, not to drop any other gin. That's one of the main difficulties of this lock. And it's open. ASSA 700 pick. Let's get it. You will notice I replaced the circlip because it was a brass circlip, so not to ruin the original one, I used a steel Euro style circlip. Always shim ASSA locks. They are full of small holes in the core where the gins and Christmas trees can fall, and then you may break your lock. So always shim the lock, even if you know the core very well. Accidents happen. This Scandinavian oval has a core that is a bit larger than the normal Euro core, so I had to improvise and use a custom follower. As you can see, it's not very easy to use, and I just dropped one pin, and you will see where it fits. I am now going to remove the key pins from the core. There are also 2 steel inserts in holes in the core that need to be removed. As you can see, the core is counter milled on chambers 1, 2, 4 and 6, corresponding to the gins and Christmas trees that exist in this lock. Now I will show you the driver pins and how they are placed in the chambers. This first one is a Christmas tree. The springs are pretty strong, so you have to be careful. We call this a Christmas tree pin because it does look a little bit like a Christmas tree. It has two spooled parts, one larger and one smaller. The smaller one will interact with the counter milling. This is a tapered pin. The diameter of the tips is smaller than the middle of the pin. Sometimes they may drop below the shear line if you allow too much counter rotation. Pin 7 is a standard pin, the only standard pin in the lock. Here we have another Christmas tree. Another tapered pin. I was trying to show you the gin in position, but it jumped. I swear it was well placed. We call this one gin or gin spool because it does look a little bit like a bottle of gin. That lip will snag in the counter milling. I have no idea why this is so jumpy, but I will overlay the photo of the pins. This is it. Hope you liked it. Now for the tutorial. In this first part of the tutorial, I will show you how the Christmas trees work and how they get stuck in the counter milling. So they have two parts. They have a large spooled part. It will be stuck the same way as any spool does, so you have to allow counter rotation, and then the smaller spool part will have its lip stuck in the counter milling. It will not move, it will not counter rotate. We have to manually counter rotate, and it will allow that part to leave the counter milling. This requires a very precise technique, because ASSA locks, especially the 700, are very well designed and have tight tolerances. So if you are not careful enough, you will drop other gins and Christmas trees. Tension control is very important in this case, and you will have to find a way to control the core the best you can, so that you will not lose control over the counter rotation. Usually that is done with two tensioners. You have to find the best way to control rotation in one direction and the other. Some placements of the tensioners will work, some will not. Usually it is better to pinch the tensioners instead of spreading them. It will be more comfortable and give you more control. So you'll have just to find the best way. Obviously you will not want the tensioners to scrape against the body of the lock. You can use other types of tensioners, pry bars for example. I decided to use two Z-bars and placed like this. They work very well and they control perfectly the core. For the first part of a Christmas tree, I will only need to rotate normally with the tensioner. I only put one pin in this lock for now. So one thing you will notice, after the small part of the Christmas tree is stuck in the milling, you will have a floppy keypin, like as if it was already picked. If you don't know what the lock has inside, you may be fooled thinking that you have successfully picked that pin. But you will notice that the pin hits like a wall on the top, which means the driver pin is stuck in the milling. With other types of pins and no counter milling, you would be able to press against the top pin, the driver pin, and feel a bit of springiness. That doesn't happen in this case. So basically it is stuck in the milling. I'm positioning myself better so you can see what is happening. So first, the normal counter rotation of the large spool part. That is set. Now the key pin is floppy, but you can feel it hits like it's hitting a wall on top, which means it's in the counter milling. So now what I do is pulse the pin. You have to be very exact where you touch the key pin so it goes straight up. And now you manually counter rotate slowly, 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 and eventually it will go and you can rotate back the core normal direction. And it is picked. Here's again. normal counter rotation, and now the keypin is floppy. Let's find the bottom of the keypin, place it exactly where you want. Now start pulsing. Let the keypin fall a little bit every time and slowly counter rotate, pinching the tensioners until you feel that the pin goes over the shear line and go back tensioning the way you wanted to open the lock. I hope you liked it. Thank you for watching.